Hey everyone! Hey, thanks so much for coming out today to today's live stream. Welcome if you're new, welcome back if you've been here before. And also hello if you are watching this afterwards on YouTube or maybe Discord. For those of you who don't know, I'm Axel T. Ernst from Get Speaking English, and today we're going to be talking about the internet. So, for the past 6 weeks, I've been looking at the internet. If you didn't catch the previous streams, you can check out my YouTube channel and find the previous 3 lessons in this series. Today, we're going to be wrapping up. We're going to be talking about part 4 of the speaking paper of the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. And we're going to be focusing, as I said, on the internet, on social media, and hopefully learn a lot of really great phrases, useful vocabulary, and things just for talking about this topic. All right, perfect. So, as I mentioned, this lesson, it is aimed at preparing students for the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. However, a lot of this language, a lot of this vocabulary will also be really useful for an IELTS exam, for example, a TOEFL exam, any kind of general English exam at a B2 C1 level, or also just people who are looking to speak English at an upper intermediate to an advanced level, even at a proficient level. We're really just looking to, get more comfortable talking about topics at these higher levels and just really learning all the phrases and the vocabulary and things that we would use for talking about this. All right, perfect. So specifically today, we're going to do a bit of a warm-up activity, and we're going to focus on children today. We're going to talk a bit about keeping children safe online. So we're going to do a bit of an activity about that. And then we're going to look at some questions similar to ones that you might find on part 4 of the B2 first or the C1 advanced exam. So we'll look at some model answers. We can brainstorm answers together. This is live. If you're here on Twitch, you can jump into the chat, throw in your ideas as well, say hi. So if you have anything to add, I could definitely put it into our notes. And then afterwards, I'm going to take this video, I'll take the notes, put everything together, and then I'll put it onto my YouTube channel so we can have that as a resource to learn from together after. All right, perfect. So today as a warm-up, so last time we looked at a web page together, and we spent some time talking about how to keep businesses, how to protect businesses from online threats and things like that. I thought that we would kind of do a similar activity today, but instead of looking at a website, we are going to look at this infographic. So I have this infographic here. 10 internet safety tips for parents. So last time we looked at an article, just the top portion, and we were using the article as jumping off points to discuss how to stay safe on the internet. So today we're going to check out this together. We're going to talk about some of the language that's used on this infographic. But while we're reading, I want you to think, what are some examples we could use to illustrate each point? So, each of these points, they're an instruction, right? But let's try to think if we can think of maybe some specific examples of what somebody might do to achieve, each point, right? So let's think about that while we're reading together. All right, great. So number one tip they have here is don't block all access to technology. So don't block all access to technology. help your child learn to use tech safely and positively. So if we talk about blocking something, what do we mean? We just basically mean to ban or prevent something from happening, right? So they're saying, we don't want to block everything, but maybe teach them how to use those devices in a more responsible way, right? Yeah, so that's, not a bad idea. And number two, so to take an interest in your child's favorite apps or sites and co-view or co-create at times. So if we take an interest in something, right, it's just another way to say to become interested in something, right? So, maybe your child is really interested in playing video games. We can also learn about those games, maybe play those games with the child. So that's what we're talking about. When we talk about taking an interest in something, it's just a collocation, a phrase to say to become interested in something. And they have this interesting prefix here too. This co-view or co-create, co-view or co-create at times. So this little prefix is just kind of interesting, and it really just means to do something with somebody else. So like to collaborate or cooperation. We look at that word that also has that co prefix in there, and that just means to do something kind of mutually with something. So we can co-view or co-create things with our children, basically. So that's what they're saying. All right. So number 3 here. So be the parent. You're in charge. Set boundaries and consider using filtering software. So if you're in charge, you are the leader. So that's what they mean. So to be in charge of something means, you are responsible. You are, the responsible for something. You might be in charge of a business, for example, or in charge of a specific department at your work. That means that you are the head, you are the leader of that business or that department. So that's what it means to be in charge of something. And that if we talk about boundaries, so set boundaries and consider using filtering software, we're just talking about limits. So you set boundaries. Basically, again, another collocation that means to put limits in place. So basically something. And if we're talking about filtering, so to filter something just generally means to, it basically means to sort something from something larger. So, for example, if you might have some dirty water, for example, you could filter that water, filter out all the pollution, all the impurities, and then you'll get left with clean water. So if we're talking about filtering something, they just basically mean, sorting it and making sure that we're removing all of the bad things, and it's separated from the good things. So here, we have filtering software. We could use software to sort of make sure that children aren't seeing the bad things and they're only seeing the good things online. So that could be something, right? Yeah. So basically, again, we're just basically blocking out certain types of information that would be bad for children to see, and that would definitely be something. All right, here. So create a family media agreement and tech-free zones such as cars, bedrooms, and meals. All right, so an agreement, that would be just sort of an official an official an official agreement. You both agree that you're going to do something, and that you would do that. This free zone thing, if something is a something free zone, we're basically saying, an area where something is not allowed. So a tech free zone would be an area where we wouldn't use any technology, and they're suggesting, within cars, within bedrooms, those sort of things. And number 5 here, so teach your children what personal information they should not reveal online. So personal information, that's going to be all that kind of important information, such as, our names, addresses, date of birth, maybe where you go to school, the address of where you work, those sort of things, right? So, and they're saying we don't want to reveal that information. And if you reveal something, it basically means that you share something that was previously a secret. So they're saying not to reveal, not to share that kind of information with people, and keep it private, keep it a secret. To be honest, I'm not sure what this yappy thing means, but an acronym is basically sort of a short form way to say a title, to say a name, where we just take the capital letters and sort of spell out things. So like, for example, FYI, for your information, is kind of an acronym. So lots of acronyms in English, yeah. All right, here. So number 6. So help your child learn to filter information online and navigate fact from fiction. So we're back to this filter idea again. So, right, so the idea of removing specific information. So we need to teach our children how to decide what's good information and what's bad information, so they can focus on paying attention to the good information, right? So yeah, so they need to filter information online and navigate fact from fiction. So they need to, like I said, they need to figure out what's good information, what's bad information. And of course, a fact is something that's real, based on evidence, right? Whereas something fiction, that's something that is made up. It is fantasy, something created. So the opposite of a fact would be fiction. All right, great. Number 7, so navigate digital dilemmas with your child and avoid using devices as rewards or punishments. So dilemma is a great word. So a dilemma is basically, it's kind of like a problem, but it's where you're in a situation where you have to make a choice. But it can be really, really hard to figure out what's the best choice to make. Maybe they both have some serious downsides to them. Either way, the decision is really, really hard to make, and that's what a dilemma is. So we need to, give our information we need to give our children the information they need so they can choose wisely when they encounter a problem, right? Yeah, and again, they say, right, so they say avoid using devices as rewards or punishments. So think we know that, a reward, it's something that you get for being good, kind of like maybe like a prize or something, but something you receive to acknowledge that you've done a great job. And then a punishment, of course, is kind of like the opposite. It's something that might happen to you. Maybe you have to pay a fine, or you spend some time, you have some, maybe like a freedom or something taken away for a period because you did something bad, right? Yeah, so rewards or punishment. So they're saying don't use technology as an award or a punishment. So it's potentially better to use other things as well. And I know that the word navigate came up earlier as well, and I didn't really talk about it, but it's common to hear the word navigate get used when talking about problem solving or figuring out issues and things like that. Literally, to navigate means to find your way around. So say that you're out on the street, you need to figure out where you're going. You would navigate with directions to figure out where you're going. Here, we mean more like moving through the problems to figure out how you can overcome a problem. So if we talk about navigating problems or navigating dilemmas, we mean figuring out how we can move through those situations and come out on the other side, hopefully in a better situation, basically. Yeah. All right. Number 8. Balance green time and screen time at home. Focus on basic developmental needs. So obviously, to balance, we want to make sure everything is distributed equally. And I'm not 100% sure what they mean here by the screen time thing. If I were to guess, just given the context and given how green might be used in other contexts, they probably mean time spent outside. So, maybe away from urban environments. You'll hear about, green spaces. Those usually refer to parks or like national parks, gardens, things like that. So I think green time, we mean time spent outdoors in nature, basically. So if I were to take a guess, I think that that's what they mean. And we're talking about basic developmental needs, things that the child need to grow up and thrive, be really great. Okay, here we go. Don't support your child to sign up for sites with age restrictions. So, for example, 13 plus if they are underage. So the language actually here on this one is a little bit weird. The grammar, I should say. However, age restrictions, though, that is a great word. So age restrictions has to do with, maybe you log on to, you go to set up a Instagram account, for example, and I think that you need to be 13 years or older. Otherwise, you're not allowed to set up an account. So that would be age restrictions. And if you are underage, that means that you are too young to do something. So for example, I think in the United States, if you are under 21 years of age, you cannot drink, you are underage. So, and they might talk about underage drinking. They mean people drinking, teenagers that are drinking, and they are not 21 years old yet. So that's what it means to be underage, right? So we want to make sure that kids that are too young aren't on these websites. And then finally, learn more, explore reliable resources for parents if you can educate yourself. And of course, if something is reliable, We know that it's something that we can depend on. It's trustworthy. It's good information. And we know that it's good information. Yeah. All right. Okay. So now that we've been through these little tips, I'm just wondering if any of you have come up with any examples, maybe. So examples of things that we could do. Because we always want to think, if we are writing an exam, for example, or if we are if we're writing an exam, if we're writing an essay, for example, we always want to have supporting arguments and things like that. So, and usually having an example or giving really solid reasons for things really helps us support our ideas, right? So it's always worth sort of thinking about things like, here's an idea, but what's a concrete example that would help us illustrate that point? So for example, number 2 here, so take an interest in your child's favorite apps or sites, co-view or co-create at times. So, I mean, as I was thinking about this earlier, we might say, for instance, a parent or child could create a YouTube video together. They could, or an entire channel actually, maybe they could do a YouTube channel together. They could create the content together, maybe collaborate on the editing. So that could be like a direct example of this point, right? To show what it would look like in reality. Let's take another one. Let's talk about number 5, maybe. So teach your child what personal information they should not reveal online. So again, what might that look like in practice? Maybe you teach them that they should not give out their full home or school address. Instead, children could just say what country or region they live in. So they know to just speak in generalities instead of talking about specifics, right? So that is a direct example of this point of how we could teach them, what kind of thing we could teach them. And lastly, balancing green time instead of screen time. So I was thinking about this one. For instance, when we're organizing, we could organize a device-free family outing, right? Where everyone goes hiking together at a national park. And while they're on that hike, they could leave their phones in the car. So that could be something that they could do. So that's a little thought though. So if you think about this though, this may not be the most safest idea, right? This could potentially be dangerous. It would be good to have your cell phone with you if you're on a hike, right? In case you get lost, you could maybe call for help. You could use the GPS. So maybe that's not the best advice. However, it's important to really remember that when we're doing these kinds of exams, it's the quality of our English that is the most important thing, okay? The quality of our ideas is not really that important. So we always have to remember that these exams, these are tests of our English ability. They're not tests of our knowledge. So we can kind of say dumb things, that's fine. If you're just talking about some of these tasks, every now and then you're gonna probably say something a little bit silly, right? But that's fine, right? You don't have a lot of time. You don't really have any time to prepare for these answers, anything like that, right? So, you're gonna say some dumb things from time to time while you're doing these exams, and don't worry about it. Don't let it hold you back. Just keep going. Don't overthink about it. Do not worry about it. Yeah, so they're not judging your knowledge about a topic. They're just judging, evaluating your English, okay? So that's really important to keep in mind. Okay, all right, so let's go back. Let's go back to my little presentation. If I can get it. There we go. All right. So let's take this activity maybe and let's expand on it a little bit and start talking about sort of part 4 of the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. So this final part, it's a discussion really. If you're unaware, the B2 first and the C1 exam are done in pairs, so you'll be taking it with another candidate or possibly 2 other candidates, but usually you take it with 1 candidate, and then there are 2 examiners in the room, but you are only talking to 1 examiner, and that examiner is going to be sort of moderating the conversation, you could say. So this part, it's a conversation between you, your partner, and then that examiner. And this the questions in this part are going to be related to whatever topic you spoke about on part 3 of the exam. So related to part 3 of the exam, and all of these ideas, they're going to be kind of, I like to call them big picture ideas. They're a little bit more abstract. They're kind of designed to make you think about other people, the outside world. So not about you, not about your experiences, but other people's experiences, what the rest of the world is like. Potentially, they're there to make you think about things that you haven't really thought about. So that's kind of the idea around these questions in this part of the exam. So what's going to happen is, either you or your partner will be asked a question, and then that person, whoever is asked the question, needs to respond to the question and typically give an opinion. It'll be sort of an opinion question usually. And then, once you've finished responding, you can ask your partner for their feedback as well and try to engage them in a conversation. Alternatively as well, if your partner is responding, they get to the end and they haven't asked you for feedback, you could also potentially step in and comment on what they said as well. So that is another idea as well. But the aim here is really just to have a nice conversation about these topics, right? So you want to continue having that conversation, and you typically just want to do it either until you run out of things to say, potentially run out of time, or the examiner steps in and stops you. But don't worry about filling the time. I know in part 3 you need to fill that time, right? But part 4 is a little bit more organic. It's like a casual, normal conversation like you would have in real life. So the examiner, if the conversation comes to a natural pause, or if they want to move on, or they find it's becoming repetitive, they will step in, they will ask another question and help guide that conversation. So a couple points here. Do keep your contributions short, so it's not a monologue, right? We want to focus on the conversation. So answering the question, having, putting out an idea, and then responding, and then adding onto that idea, moving the question along, right? Or moving the conversation along. You can ask your partners to agree or disagree with you. That's all fine. You can ask questions if you are a strong question asker. I always encourage people to ask questions. And you just basically want to be building and adding new things to the conversation. So don't let it become repetitive. If it starts becoming repetitive, then it would be best to move on to the next question, right? But as long as we're adding new things, it's all good. We can continue the conversation. So that in mind, let's think about some of these questions maybe. So I have a couple here. let's think of maybe some model answers, or even just ideas, really. So the first one that I have here is, why is it important for kids to learn about online safety? Yeah, so why? The why. So one of the first things that came to my mind, was that, one big thing is that it's important to protect children from online predators, right? So those are people who may harm a child in some way, right? Those people may abduct them or act inappropriately with them. They could potentially kill a child, right? There's all sorts of terrible things that can happen, right? So children really need to understand the potential dangers of interacting with strangers online, right? So just going back to some of these ideas, if we're talking about a predator, here specifically an online predator, we mean somebody that's looking to harm someone else. Usually we use the word predator when we're talking about nature, right? So a predator would be an animal, a carnivore that would kill and eat another animal, right? So they would try to catch or hurt another living being and then harm it or eat it or whatever. But here we're talking about a predator, somebody who may want to harm children or maybe want to trick children on the internet. So that would be, could call those people predators as well. And what does it mean to abduct someone? So to abduct someone, that just basically means to take somebody away forcefully. So if you take a child away, you trick them into going with you, or you kind of capture them. You take them away without having permission from their other adults, or even permission from themselves necessarily. So it's usually a very negative thing. So that's what it means to abduct someone, and that's a very real issue with safety on the internet, right? And finally, too, if they're acting inappropriately, we mean maybe these people will behave in a way that's just not okay or acceptable, right? So they might do things that make the child uncomfortable or scared, right? So that can refer to a whole pile of different things that people could do to children. So it's really important, right? So lots of potentially bad things could happen to them. Definitely, right? Right, yeah. So many potentially bad things could happen to them, like I said. So they need to protect themselves and learn that it's dangerous to share personal information. So again, names, addresses, those sort of things. People with malicious intent could use that information to track them, for example, or stalk them, right? So if you have malicious intent, something malicious just means that you have bad intentions, or you want to intentionally harm or hurt someone. So you have malicious intent, this collocation here, it means that you want to hurt or cause, make bad things happen to other people, right? And to track something, that just means to follow, or maybe even monitor somebody's movements, somebody's activities. So to follow them, right? Or monitor, to watch them. And stalk is a little bit more insidious, a little bit more evil. If you stalk someone, you are also following them, but you do it really persistently, as in you do it a lot, you do it often, and you do it to the point where that person feels really afraid, they feel really uncomfortable. So, we don't want children to be stalked online, right? That would be terrible. So, that could potentially be something, right? I have one more final thought here about this. Um, oh, that's a big one too. It could also prevent children from cyberbullying, right? Online platforms, they can be breeding grounds for cyberbullying. Commenters gang up, they get together, they target individuals and maybe say things they wouldn't say to people in person because they are anonymous, right? So lots of different things. Actually, I'm just gonna get rid of that bit. So lots of different things here, right? So yeah. So it's really important to protect them from cyberbullying. And what does that mean? Well, if we just bully someone in the real world, we're talking about treating somebody in maybe a cruel or a threatening manner, be really aggressive to them. And then cyberbullying is just basically doing that same thing, but using digital devices as the method for targeting people. So, cyberbullying, using our devices basically to harm, threaten, be really mean, intentionally aggressive to people. Yeah, so we could definitely, we could prevent them from cyberbullying. And if a place is a breeding ground for something, this basically means that it is kind of like this perfect place where something can grow really easily. It can happen really easily. So, and usually we use it to talk about negative things. Sometimes it can be used as a positive thing, but usually it's used more for negative things. So I have this example here, kitchen sponges are a breeding ground for bacteria, right? So they're the perfect place for bacteria and all those gross germs to thrive, to multiply. So that's what we mean if something is a breeding ground. So the internet, perfect breeding ground for cyberbullying and that kind of thing, right? Yeah. So, but if kids can recognize it though, then they could go to the correct authorities maybe, or if they see other people being cyberbullied, maybe they can step in and they can help that person, they can protect other people. So lots of things that they could do here. Yeah, so lots of potentially interesting things we could talk about this topic. You could also talk about scams, for example, so avoiding scams. Also, maybe about suspicious links, malware. We talked a lot about malware and phishing last time. So all of that's important to know about and identify. Also, just maybe about how sharing something online has long-lasting effects, right? Because basically, whatever you put on the internet is essentially permanent, right? And that can have long-lasting effects or long-lasting impacts on your future, on your reputation, all of that, right? So, maybe it's really important to know that they need to be careful about what they put on the internet because it could have an impact later on. So feel free to grab a friend, discuss this with them as well, and see what you can come up with. Yeah. So let's move on to the next one. So another question. What are some ways we can help kids understand the dangers of sharing personal information online? So, some ways. So, we're looking for some ways that we could do it. So, I was thinking about this. I suppose one obvious way is through schools, right? Teachers should be incorporating this message into age appropriate lessons, right? So small kids can maybe learn the message through games, while you can have a much more direct conversation with older children, right? So I used obvious here. One obvious way is because, this idea was very easy to think about, right? It was kind of like a no-brainer, maybe. A no-brainer, as in it didn't take a lot of thought to come up with this answer, right? So something obvious, it's kind of clear, easy to think about, easy to understand, right? Yeah, so definitely one obvious point would be to use schools, right? If we talk about incorporating something into something, that's just kind of another way to, it's like a synonym for add or include here. So if, teachers incorporate a message into their lessons, it just means that they include it into what they're teaching. So, and then finally, of course, too, age appropriate, something age appropriate. It just means that it's suitable for a certain age group, right? So you'll hear about, age appropriate TV and age appropriate video games. We're just talking about video games that are good, suitable, right, for a specific age group. Yeah, so that's kind of one idea. I think too that they could also be integrated into non-computer related classes, right? Like language arts, maybe, where students are encouraged to read about the risks and maybe write articles on the subject to warn others, right? And again, here, integrate. Integrate is kind of like another, it's sort of another way to say include. So you would, put something into part of a larger whole. So similar to integrating something with something, or sorry, the same as incorporating something in something else. You would integrate something into something else. So that could be something. And if you encourage someone to do something, it just means that you kind of, you support them, you motivate them, you make them want to do this. So you give them sort of a positive message to make them want to do these things, So, we could get the kids to read about these topics, then maybe write an article about it, and then the article to warn other people. Yeah, so definitely an idea. Yeah. And, lastly, too, another idea, right? Maybe guest speakers could be invited to speak to the kids. And what is a guest speaker? So a guest speaker is basically just somebody who comes in from an outside organization, maybe just basically somebody who comes in outside of the like the local system, I guess. So maybe somebody from an outside business, an outside organization, they're invited in to talk about something. So guest speakers could be invited to speak to the kids or offer workshops, and cybersecurity experts or law enforcement officers could conduct workshops or give presentations about the topics. So, and I'm just highlighting these here because these are very common collocations. You say to conduct a workshop. It's just another way to say to hold a workshop. And of course, we say to give a presentation. So another common collocation. Yeah, so good collocations to know. Yeah, so again, lots of things that we can talk about under this topic, right? And then finally, a good one to debate. Should it be the parents or school's responsibility to teach children about online safety, right? So, good question, right? And one possible answer we could maybe think about, it's like, well, I think many people say parents should be the ones responsible for educating their children. They have the closest relationship to their children and can really make sure the message is personalized to match their child's age, and also make reference to the child's online activities, maybe to send a stronger message. And if something is really personalized, if we send a personalized message, we just mean, it's very tailored, it's very custom, it's very specific to that person, right? So, I mean, that's definitely one thing parents can do. They know their children best, so they would be able to make sure that it is perfectly suited for their kids, right? And this too, to make reference to something. And that just basically means to maybe to like mention kind of like mention something, essentially, or talk about it. So, for example, while they're talking about when they're talking about educating, maybe maybe their children really loves video games, for example, so that they could use video games as part of their lesson, or part of the conversation, just so it's a bit more relatable for the child, right? So if we make reference to something, it just means that you mention it or you bring up it when you are, talking. So I mean, that's potentially one idea. Of course, though, on the other hand, though, schools play a crucial role, so a very important role in providing formal education to children, right? And not just about online safety, but for many, many different topics, right? So it's really easy for them to integrate lessons about online safety into other lessons. So there again, we have that word integrate. And also it would ensure that all students receive the message and that message is age appropriate, right? So lots of really great things, right? So informal education, formal education, that's kind of again another collocation. But if we're just referring to, the public education, that's based on, because it's based on a very structured approach, right? It's more systematic, we might call it, where the learning is taken place through sort of an organized situation, an organized instruction, right? As opposed to informal education, which would be more like education learned through experience, for example, or maybe, your friends, your relatives, or maybe even stories, right? Just kind of like the education that you would pick up on the street, per se, right? So formal education, talking about anything through the school system, really, college, university, and then informal education, things that you would learn in the real world or from people that are maybe close to you, right? But yeah, so definitely two sides that you could potentially talk about. Or maybe you want to talk about that it's a collaborative approach, right? So something collaborative is something collaborative, then it involves, multiple people, multiple organizations working together to reach a common goal, right? So, maybe parents and schools could potentially work together as partners or something and educate them about online safety. And they could potentially promote, I don't know, maybe best practices with children, right? The thing about formal education is that, you have all of these industry experts that kind of determine the best practices for things, right? And so that's just basically a working method or methods that are officially accepted within an industry, right? So, I mean, they could definitely recommend some best practices, and then all of that could be integrated into the lessons. But yeah, I like a real collaborative approach, right? To like figuring out how to solve this problem where, multiple people are engaged and it's not necessarily one person's or, the parents' responsibility or the school's responsibility, but kind of everyone's responsibility, right? So a lot of different ways that you can think about this, you can talk about this. I definitely encourage you to think about these questions yourself, practice talking about them, maybe thinking about some examples to illustrate your points, and potentially using some of the language we learned as well in the first part of this lesson into your answers, and just, seeing how you might talk about this topic. And if you have a friend, even better, discuss it with them, right? All right. Anyways, that is it for today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this little series of live lessons about the internet. Next week, I'm going to be starting a new topic. So next week, I'm going to be starting to talk about relationships. So on all of my various social media accounts, Telegram, Instagram, there's going to be lots of things about relationships. So be sure to check that out. And so I am planning live lessons for relationships as well. However, I think I'm going to bounce back over on Facebook because I think it is easier for people to participate there. However, I do like Twitch. So I would like to do something here in the future if I can, but I think for now, live lessons need to stay on Facebook Live. So that is going to happen, and those are going to happen on Thursdays at 1300 UTC, and the first one is going to happen April 11th. So be sure to come and join me for that on the Get Speaking English Facebook page on Thursdays at 1300 UTC starting April 11th. And we're going to be talking about part 1, some vocabulary about relationships. Yeah, all right, perfect. So as always, if you have any questions or comments or anything, feel free to reach out to me. And that's it. I look forward to speaking to you all next time. All right, have a good one.